we'll continue to look up and hope it's enough. So the underlying story is you get sold stuff 1 unit at a time. But what happens? You get sold the first unit of water. You pay $2,000 for it. What happens to the amount of money that you have left to spend on additional units of water and other goods? Go up or down? So every time you do this, it shifts the budget constraint inwards, right? Budget constraint doesn't stay still. Think about what a demand curve is doing. I'm going to the board here. I'm just drawing a demand curve. I got a demand curve, right? Where am I getting it from? I'm getting it from a story, right? Getting it from a story like this. I have two goods, X2 and X1. I have a budget constraint. I have an indifference curve. I find a tangency. I up the price on one of the goods. I come in here and I find out, oh, look, I buy less. Yeah, that's the story. But my story that I'm telling you doesn't quite work that way because two things happen. First of all, I sell you an extra unit of the good right here. I sell you some of the good. The amount of money you have to buy the next unit goes down. Basically, your budget constraint is shifting inwards. So the demand curve, each time you buy one of these things, assuming it's a normal good, is going to shift inwards a little bit. So I'm taking the area under the demand curve, assuming that it stays constant, that taking the money from you for the first unit of water didn't do anything really to your choices. It was just the minimus. You made $100,000 this year, and I charged you $60, and for engineering work, you still have the same income. And that's what's being assumed, that the income factor doesn't matter. So that's why it's an imperfect measure. When you get to marketed goods, like our electricity example, you'll discover that the consumer surplus and the exact measures give you answers that are fabulously close. I mean, fabulously close. So the demand curve isn't moving around real fast, depending on how much I charge for electricity. When you do this for some other goods, things that you think of in the environment, you'll see that it doesn't work that way. But that comes later. So we like consumer surplus. Why do we like it? Because you draw the demand curve, you shade in an area, you shade in the revenue, you subtract one from the other, and you're gone. And we like that. There are two exact money measures, equivalent variation and compensating variation. There's actually a theorem that says consumer surplus lies between them for a good that is marketed. So let's start with equivalent variation. The consumer actually faces an increase in the price of the good. This is reality. So let's be careful. There's reality and there's a thought experiment going on. And there's only one piece of reality here. Let me go, let's go see if I can get my pointer back again. Pointer, red, thank you. So this is reality. That's reality. That's all that's going to happen. The consumer used to pay P0 and now has to pay a higher price P1. We know from our standard diagram that that's going to make the consumer less happy. Right? That's still part of reality. You just draw your standard diagram. Here's one budget constraint. Here's another budget constraint with a higher price, right? And lo and behold, the consumer ends up at a lower indifference curve. Yeah? It's just a function of price goes up. So this is the thought experiment part. I got the consumer to the lower indifference curve. I'm going to draw this again. So imagine those things touch. And you, of course, imagine that does not go upwards. So the consumer has been forced onto a lower indifference curve. The thought experiment is, suppose instead of he's getting pushed down on this lower indifference curve by a high price, that you're able to go up to him and pick his pocket and take money away from him. How much money would you have to take away to end up at that same lower indifference curves? So there are two equivalent ways to get to the less happy situation. Way one, the reality, the price went up. Way two, the thought experiment, money got taken away. The amount of money that you would take away to get the consumer to the same lower indifference curve you have with a higher price, that amount of money is equivalent variation. That's an exact measure of what that price change was worth to that consumer. Right? So we work off utility. We start off at a high indifference curve, high level of utility, high level of happiness. We do something evil. We raise prices. Consumer ends up less happy. I can't measure the amount of happiness, can I? But I can ask the thought question, what if, instead of raising the price, what if, I mean this to be straight, this is the problem with drawing here, right? Here's the original, here's a parallel one, right? So if I shift it down in a parallel fashion, I could presumably get to any lower indifference curve I want to get to by taking away money. Well, I want to take away just enough money to get to the same indifference curve. So this and this ought to be the same indifference curve. That's the idea of equivalent variation. And I'm sure we have a much better picture. Now remember, we have a real electric example, and so it's coming back. It's exactly the same one we had before. You have the indifference curves. You have two indifference curves here. You have the original, right? And here's the original tangency, and here's the original quantity of electricity. Yeah? And here's the original budget constraint, right? It's the budget. And now I've doubled price, and here's the new tangency, right? And that new tangency is on a lower indifference curve. There's the new, I'll just write in diff, yeah? And then I ask, can I get to that another way? And here, what I really like is a giant, I'll try not to mess up the screen, but here's a giant straight edge. What you do is you say, well, look, here's the original budget constraint, yeah? And I just want to shift this down parallel by I, and I do that until I create a tangency with a lower indifference curve. So I already know what the lower indifference curve is. Why? I have my original, I doubled the price, I found the new tangency, the new lower quantity purchase of electricity, and therefore it's on a new lower indifference curve. Now I want to know a second way to get there. So I want a budget constraint parallel to the original, so it has the same prices, but with less income. So it's going to come down in parallel fashion. I take a straight edge, and I come down the best I can, and I draw a line, and I mark my tangency. Then I can find the amount of money. How can I do that? Well, let's see. What's the price of the thing on this axis, which is in dollars? What's the price of $1 in dollars? Yeah, each dollar costs $1, right? So I've measured all things other than electricity as in dollars. This is what you spend on other stuff. iPads, whatever. The whole big bundle of all the other stuff I can compress to one item to keep it on the graph. This is the amount of electricity, megawatt hours. So all I have to do to read the income, the original income is 10,000. I can read it right off the graph. Y divided by the price of the thing on the vertical axis is Y divided by 1 is the intercept. And then I can read where the new line intercepts. The new line intercepts is 98.93. So I now know what this cost. It cost, I did it exactly. The equivalent variation is $107.06. So I've obviously calculated this very accurately. And unfortunately, in some sense, you need to know it out to this number of digits. So remember that it's not just 107.06. And that's the exact answer to equivalent variation. If instead of raising the price of electricity by $50, I took $107.06 away from you, you would be at the same level of happiness either way. They are two equivalent ways of making you less happy. That's the reason why we use the term equivalent. So we got that. It's equivalent variation. And here narrates the picture, but we've done that. And here I've bolded it, so if you're going to memorize it, I think that would be it. The equivalent variation to a price change is the change in income that makes the consumer just as well off as if the prices had actually changed from P0 to P1. So you wanted a quick thing that you could write down. Someone said define EV. That might do you. You might be able to shorten it up a little bit. Remember, the textbook has these, and they're bolded, and they may be more succinct. I remember it. I didn't used to be able to remember before I wrote the textbook. Truth, 35 years of being in the field, I couldn't tell you what equivalent was, what compensating was. And so I had to find a way to remember it. And I remember there are two equivalent ways to get the consumer to the new utility level: raise prices or take income. That's how I remember it. And that might even do better for if I said, what's equivalent variation? And you could say, if you said that, I think that would be a reasonable definition too. That might be easier for you. So now I have a second one of these, compensating variation. And it's just as legitimate a measure. So in one case, there are two ways you can be hammered. Your prices can go up. Money can be stolen from you, right? And they're equivalent. In this case, you're going to be compensated. Your price goes up. That's the only reality here. And then the imagined part is somebody comes along and stuffs money in your pocket until you end up back at your original indifference curve. Remember, we have a diagram up on the board, simple. First tangency, second tangency. Well, suppose I had the second tangency and I added money. Well, then the budget constraint would come up and eventually would come back tangent where you were before. Not to the same bundle, but to the same indifference curve. So you can be compensated for the price change. How much do I have to compensate you? That's compensating variation. So let's see the picture. So again, we start out with the same beginning point. Here we are. That's our original tangency. We're on indifference curve 1. We're on budget constraint 1. The state decides electricity's too cheap. We're burning too much coal. We ought to tax the stuff. It taxes the stuff. Price doubles. We end up here. Right? New point. We're now at a lower indifference curve. There's the lower one. That's all the reality. Then we ask, what would happen if I added money until they ended up back where they were before? Well, remember, now they have the new high prices. So when I add money, I'm going to be shifting up this budget constraint number 2. And again, if you did this, you did this for homework or you did this on exam, you take a straight edge and you get this thing parallel, and then by eye you'd shift it up and you'd find the tangency point, which is way up here, and I'll mark that in a second. Okay, so this is up here. This is your new tangency. And what did I do? I shifted this up parallel until I found the tangency with the original indifference curve. So in the thought experiment, I've returned your utility to where it was at the beginning, by giving you money. And how much money did I give you? Well, again, I started at 10,000. I can read off the new amount, 10,108, but it's really 107.69. So now I have two measures. One of them is 107.69, and what was the other one? 107.06. Yeah? That's pretty close, is it not? Is that amazingly close? And then I have Willig's theorem, and it says that the simple thing that I would have found by taking the area under the demand curve would be somewhere between the two of them. Would that not be good enough to just use the simple method and not go through all this? Yes, for this, obviously, it would be. I've increased the price of electricity by double, and I've got to look past the decimal point to find the difference in the measures, the money measures. So I might as well go with the simple one, and that's the right answer here. And here's narrating CV in slides. And here's the way I would state it. The change in income, and you might say the thought experiment change in income is really not happening to anyone. There's an experiment that economists did in their head. Right? I'm asking, what if I gave them more income? Not I gave them more income. So the change in income compensates for the change in price. The consumer is no better and no worse off than before. So we now know that for a normal good, CV and EV and consumer surplus all give close enough to the same answer. You don't have to worry about it. And the key issue here is the good is marketed. That's what drives it. You can buy the amount of electricity you want. You're always at a tangency. You're moving from one tangency to another. Okay. Does it work for goods that are not bought? No, it doesn't. Government provides good, and people have different preferences, right? So government provides good. Some of the people won't get the amount they like. Does that make sense? Let's just stop there as a matter of public finance and think about that. We're moving fast enough. We'll get done. We don't have to be done with all these slides today. So slow down now. So does government produce the amount of each public good that you would like? Is that right or wrong? Could it ever do it for all of us? Why? Why is it hopeless? Why can they never get it exactly right? And they're producing a public good. Think of a public good. Name a public good. What do you want? What? Flood barriers. Yeah? What? Flood barriers. Okay, that makes more sense. So I was wondering, blood barriers. Why am I worried about blood barriers? All right, flood barriers. As you get older, your hearing gets more interesting. So they build a flood barrier on a river. Okay. Will everybody get protected by the same amount? So what about people who live next to the river? They presumably are the ones that are happiest, right? What about people who live, 200 meters uphill? They're not going to care. So how are you going to find the size flood barrier that's the size desired by both those people? The one down the hill is going to want a big flood barrier. The one up the hill is going to want a little flood barrier. And you can only build one flood barrier. So some of them will get the wrong amount of flood barrier from their own point of view. Other examples? There are much more pernicious examples than that. What about education? Government provides education. So we don't necessarily have to claim that it's a public good. It's enough that the government provides the good. Government usually provides public goods, but the government also does provide things you could think of as mixed or private. Government provides K through 12 education. If I asked what kind of K through 12 education would this group like, and then I went to a very different group, and particularly I picked a group that does not have a lot of people in the University of California in it, and I asked them how much public education would you like, will you get the same answer? You think you will or won't? You won't. So once you decide that you're going to have one level of public education, which California did in a famous Supreme Court decision, and I've just lost the name of the decision. It will come back in a while. But a couple of years before the property tax revolt, the California Supreme Court looked at the inequalities within the Los Angeles School District, not between LA and other districts, but within. And they were phenomenal in the amount of money spent per pupil. And then instead of saying Los Angeles must provide the same amount of money per pupil, regardless of whether it's a rich or poor area, they reached a little further and said every school district in the state may spend no more than $500 more than any other district. And that meant everybody would get the same expenditure on public schools. Does that work? Why is that not going to work? Okay, how many people came from Orinda, Moraga, Marin, almost anywhere but Marin City, anywhere near UCLA, anywhere near Santa Barbara? There's a bunch of you? Okay, and I know at least one person here comes from Lancaster, not to single the person out. Is there a difference in income in those communities? Would there be a large difference in income, perhaps, between, say, Santa Barbara and Lancaster, Palmdale? Double? Triple? What do you think? I don't know the right answer. I'm thinking double or triple. Yeah, probably, right? And so education's a normal good. How much would people in Santa Barbara want to pay relative to how much would people in any of the poorer parts of the state want to pay, like Fresno, Clovis? Right? I can name you lots of places that are poor in California. Ceres. There's an endless number of places I know in the valley. What do you think the difference would be in how much they would choose to spend? Yeah, the budget constraint would make a big difference, but there might also be some difference in preferences. Right? How would that work out? You have to go back to the old days, unfortunately. It's before your time. Not entirely. So there's an area of Walnut Creek that ends up in the La Marinda School District. Okay? So your address will say Walnut Creek, but your high school and schools will be from the other school district. Do people go there intentionally? Find out this one little place and go for it? Yeah, because they have a preference for the educational system, and they can take care of that to some degree still by moving into a richer district. It doesn't work like it used to work. It used to work a lot better, because then the differences in what the district spent were really large. Today they're compressed. So there's also probably a difference in preferences. So you have people with different preferences and people with widely disparate incomes, and they all get a choice of public education costing the same. What do you do about it? Let's suppose you're in one of these rich districts, and suddenly this equalization thing has happened, and your pride and joy, your great public schools, have their money taken away, and you're reduced to the average. What are the things you could do? Yeah, and you're limited. You can't get very much money. So I take you to a rich suburb of New York City, no richer, I think, than Orinda. You'll see a difference between around $20,000 a pupil and around 10. So if you went back to the early 1970s, I guarantee you the people in Orinda would put out double. The people in Berkeley on much lower income would also put out double. And some of the other school districts would be way down towards the bottom. So you can, in fact, in this system, get a little extra money. And there's another way of getting extra money. What else do you do? Yeah. I mean, and it ends up working. I mean, yeah, there's a public goods problem, there's a free rider problem, blah, 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 blah. But people do write checks for a couple $1,000 and not even think about it. And there's a different way you could solve the problem. You go to private school, right? So your kid goes to Berkeley High, and you discover that perhaps she's majoring in partying and not doing very much of her academics, and you find an alternative. Because, as one of my friends said, children lost at Berkeley High are not soon found. And so you pay, right? And you buy the amount of the good that you want very directly. Personally, my view is I got the benefits of the tax relief, so I pay almost no property taxes. And